Greetings, sports lovers. Well, we're all familiar with the story of Vince Foster and the manila envelope that originated the Arena Football League. People are less likely to know that he was both a former NFL and USFL executive. So in 1986, when the Metros played the Politicians, it was no surprise that he was looking for a new way to bring sports to the public. And in 1987, four teams did take the field: the Pittsburgh Gladiators, the DC Commandos, the Denver Dynamite, and the Chicago Bruisers. The Dynamite won Arena Bowl I over the Gladiators. In 1988, only the Bruisers and the Gladiators returned, but there was also the LA Cobras, the New York Knights, the New England Steamrollers, and the Detroit Drive. Now, what we're going to do is go through a race to the bottom, and eventually we're going to do the entirety of the Arena Football League and hopefully Arena Football 2 as well. But for now, we're just going to go through the teams that existed between 1987 and 1989. The Gladiators and the Knights are my first game. The Gladiators made it to Arena Bowl I, and they played 4 seasons in Pittsburgh, as did another incarnation for Pittsburgh from 2011 to 2014, the Power. The Knights, however, were a one-and-done team. Later, New York got another team after having basically taken the Barnstormers from Des Moines, which is a cardinal sin in my book. Therefore, the Knights moved to the quarterfinals. Game 2, the Washington, D.C. Commandos versus the New England Steamrollers. The Commandos played 2 of the first 4 seasons in 87 and 90. They had 0 playoff experience and a 4-10 record. The Steamrollers played in Providence, Rhode Island, and they were a one-and-done team with a 3-9 record, playing at the Dunkin' Donuts Center. The Steamrollers move on to the quarterfinals. Game 3 is the Denver Dynamite versus the Chicago Bruisers. The Dynamite won Arena Bowl I and played 4 of the first 5 seasons. The Bruisers played 3 seasons at Allstate Arena in Rosemont, Illinois, which is where the original test games were played. And they were coached by Ray Jauch. I apologize if I mispronounced his name. And in 1989, he was the director of operations for the Arena Football League, but he was famously the head coach of the Washington Federals of the USFL and was pretty roundly mocked in Football for a Buck, the book that was written about the USFL. Hopefully the book will be written, or is written, and I just don't know of it yet, about the early years of the Arena Football League. He also later coached the Minnesota Fighting Pike, and as late as 2004, he was an assistant coach with the Carolina Cobras. So the Bruisers go to the quarterfinals. Game 4 is the LA Cobras versus the Detroit Drive. The Cobras were in Kinjite, Forbidden Subjects, with Charles Bronson, and so that is a point in their favor, but they were a one-and-done team. The Drive were initially coached by Tim Markham. They played for 6 years and were a dynasty. They became the Massachusetts Marauders at the end of their run, which were a one-and-done team. So the Cobras move on to the quarterfinals. And my quarterfinal matchups are as follows. The Knights versus the Bruisers. The Knights were coached by Jim Valek with a total record of 10-42 between the Arena Football League and his college experience. He had been an assistant GM with the New England Patriots. The Bruisers lost Arena Bowl II to the Drive and also played 2 games in Paris and then London in 1989 against the Drive, but ultimately the Knights have to go to the finals. The next game is the Steamrollers versus the Cobras. The Steamrollers were coached by Babe Pirelli. He had a 43-53 record in the Arena Football League. He was the coach of the New England Sharks of the World Football League in 1974 and also the Denver Dynamite from 1989 to 1991, and the Charlotte Rage in 1992, the Las Vegas Sting from 94 to 95, the Anaheim Piranhas in 96, and the Florida Bobcats in 97, giving Coach Mike Hohonesi a run for his money. The Cobras were coached by Ray Wisely. He was 5-10-1 in the AFL, and his tie was with the Bruisers. He coached the Commandos for a year after the Cobras, and also he coached Gary Mullen, Arena Bowl MVP, which I actually met in Atlanta at a Georgia Force game, and he was a lovely person. I'm sending the Steamrollers to the finals, and here we are at the $50 game, the New England Steamrollers versus the New York Knights. Both were one-and-done teams. The Steamrollers had Harold Smith as their most prolific quarterback, who also played for the Dynamite and the Firebirds after that. And the Knights, New York has had 3 separate attempts at the Arena Football League. I guess any league that wants a national footprint has to have a team in New York, also TV contracts. But the Knights played in '88, the City Hawks in '97 and '98, and the Dragons from 2001 to 2008, ultimately taking the Barnstormers, which makes them a loser because that is unacceptable. So the grand champion AFL loser for 1987 to 1989 is the New York Knights. Please do let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe. Every pair of eyes is appreciated. Have a great day.